Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Friday, August 7th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. Today is day 2 of fall camp at Ohio State, and the season opener at Illinois is now just 27 days away. Following Thursday's practice, head coach Ryan Day held his first full press conference in more than 2 months. But before we begin, let's just take a moment to think about everything that has happened this week. This has been a weird, crazy year full of uncertainty, and just since Tuesday, we now have a Big Ten schedule. We've talked to players and Ryan Day. Practice has started, and the first game is less than a month away. That was a pretty good week. Buckeye Scoop beat reporter Tony Gerdeman covered that press conference for the site. Tony, let's just start with the fact that they're actually out on the field practicing. The photos and video, it all looks a little different, but Ryan Day sure sounded happy to just be back out there coaching football.
Yeah, and you mentioned what a week it has been. I think this is the sixth time you and I have recorded a podcast in the last 4 days. So if I'm a little short with you, don't take that the wrong way. But yeah, you could hear it and you could see it in his face today because we actually were on a Zoom call with him, and he was just happy to be out there. And all coaches, all head coaches are always excited about day one of fall camp. I think this day one of fall camp meant more than maybe even his first as Ohio State's head coach, because the uncertainty of the last 4 or 5 months has been an incredible thing to deal with for him, being a new head coach and having to deal with all of this and doing it day by day, because you don't know what later in the week is going to be. So you can deal with today, and then maybe by the end of the day, you might know what's ahead of you tomorrow. But yeah, he was absolutely thrilled to be out there today, was pretty effusive with his praise, liberal with his praise. He wasn't upset. He wasn't saying, we need to do better at this, we need to do better at that. He was happy and confident about his guys, and I think just being out there kind of buoys him, certainly today or yesterday.
Yeah, I came away from the same feeling after hearing Day talk that I did after talking to the players on Tuesday. He just sounds very comfortable with the safety of everyone in the program right now. That he's very comfortable with them practicing. He's comfortable with the plan. He's comfortable with the protocols they have in place. But he's not totally sold on how things will go when they have to start playing other schools.
Yeah, and that's the same thing we heard from the players, where you're doing everything that you can to make sure that everybody is safe, but you have no way of knowing what everybody else is doing. Especially right now, there are no necessarily mandates on the next level stuff that like Ohio State is doing. If they knew everybody was doing what they were doing, I think they'd be a lot more comfortable. But you don't know what everybody else is doing, and even with rules, you still don't know if everybody is following those rules. And if you are truly concerned about your players, then you have to be concerned about everybody else following those rules to keep everyone safe. And it's clear, you talk to Ryan Day for any amount of time, and he doesn't come across as a phony person when it comes to how he feels about his players and how he feels about his role as a coach. And so, yeah, I think it's impossible not to be concerned. I would imagine most coaches should be concerned just because they don't have control of everybody else's program. They only have control of theirs. So I think it's a very natural thing. I think this is where the Big Ten needs to maybe step in and just make sure and get those rules out, because we still don't know what the game day protocols are going to be, and he doesn't know, and he knows that's coming. But until it gets here and you see it in action and it's, I guess, attainable for everybody, and it's not an impossible ask, then yeah, there's probably going to be some apprehension. But for now, he's comfortable with everything Ohio State is doing, including getting ready to hit here in the next week.
But you mentioned them kind of going above and beyond what the kind of baseline rules and expectations are for most schools right now. I mean, let's go through some of the stuff they're doing right now to make sure those players are as safe as possible. I mean, he talked about the fact that they're wearing masks on the field, and that is not going to be the case for all of fall camp, but they're all wearing masks right now. They've been looking into all sorts of face shields. You can talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And then also, one side note, no crazy, weird hotel check-in day photos this fall. They are not staying in a hotel because they feel like the guys are just probably safer just being all spaced out in their own apartments. Kind of go through a little bit more detail on each of those things that they're kind of looking at.
Yeah, I had somebody ask me yesterday if they would be in a hotel, and I just assume they would because they're able to control that environment. But now that you talk to Ryan Day about it, it's like, yeah, it makes sense because it's just one less thing they would have to worry about if they don't go into the hotels. And what they're doing now, he said, is working. So why change that? So that part makes sense. You mentioned the face shields. Ryan Day said there's a number of different kinds they're trying. They're going to let the players try them out. We've seen videos of other teams where the things are fogged up completely and you can't breathe and you can't see. And so it's a matter of, he said, some face shields might work for linemen and they might not work for receivers just because of the different exertion and things like that going on. So there's going to be some trial and error there once the helmets go on. He did mention that once the helmets go on, the masks and the face coverings will likely come off because it's just asking too much at that point. It becomes a safety hazard. So there are those things. He mentioned the locker room is now on the indoor facility, which I take that as everybody just changes out on the practice field, like inside the practice field. They have tents outside the building for meetings, to have some open air meetings to allow the air to blow through there while they're out there. And, so they're doing just not things that you wouldn't even think of. Like, were you expecting to hear about the tents today or when we talked today on Thursday?
No, that was interesting. I mean, it's one of those things that makes sense. I mean, if colleges are actually going to do classes on campus this fall, maybe people will have all the outdoor classes and they won't just be in the brochures. Like, they really will do camp classes on the Oval every day. That would be quite an unusual fall semester at Ohio State. But yeah, I mean, I think that's, I mean, Day talked about the fact that they have been learning a lot more and they're sort of adapting their plan based on what they've learned. And, it seems like the science right now is indicating that if you're outside, that's a lot less of a concern of contagion than if you're inside. If you're spaced the same distance, you're better off being outside. So yeah, they're doing what they have taken into account what they've learned and have sort of adapted their plan to that. And we did a deep dive on this press conference on Thursday's edition of Buckeye Weekly. As you mentioned, we've done a few podcasts this week. You can hear a lot more about that there, but just give the listeners one more thing that you thought was notable that you heard from Day.
And this is something we also talked about on the Buckeye Weekly podcast, is when you ask questions of Day and you're looking for information, coaches aren't always like, they don't want to give everything away, and you're asking about players, and especially day one, they don't really want to delve too much and leave somebody out. But he did mention Marcus Williamson and Sevyn Banks today as guys in the secondary who are stepping up as leaders, who had stepped up as leaders. And this is Marcus Williamson. He's a senior now, a true senior, has never redshirted, but has spent most of his career dealing with some sort of injury. So this is a guy where the Buckeyes need somebody in the slot to replace Shaun Wade, that slot corner spot. We talked to Shaun Wade the other day, and he mentioned Marcus Williamson. And maybe this is a perfect match where you've got a guy in his last year wanting to finally be a part of something, to really make his mark and leave a legacy at Ohio State at a very important spot in this defense. We've seen what this defense looks like when Shaun Wade wasn't there last year. And if you don't have a more than competent person there, the entire defense can suffer. So Ryan Day didn't say like Marcus Williamson is replacing Shaun Wade, but when a name is mentioned early on, out of relative nowhere, because we haven't heard about Marcus Williamson much over the years in terms of something positive like this, when a whole bunch of other names aren't also mentioned. So your ears kind of perk up, you take note of it, you jot it down, and you put it in the back of your mind, and you see what happens as camp goes on.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of reading tea leaves that goes into covering the team, especially during a season when we're not going to have the access to fall camp that we normally would. And a lot of times, when you hear a couple different people say the same thing, especially if it's unsolicited, if it's not, a question specifically about a player, and that player's name keeps coming up. And we had a couple of years ago, we had Josh Proctor's name just kept coming up, and it was like, okay, so this guy is going to be something pretty special. Last year, you kept hearing people talk about J.K. Dobbins, about how he just was absolutely in just incredible shape and really just absolutely out to out to have a prove it kind of season. You saw the first 2,000-yard season in the history of Ohio State for running back. So this year, yeah, Marcus Williamson's name has come up unsolicited in a couple different circumstances. That is kind of telling. We also heard Brian Day talk about the fact that Justin Fields came in just remarkable shape, really, really good shape. I mean, it was the kind of quote we heard about J.K. Dobbins last year about, how he'd really worked hard and really worked himself into great shape, and it's the same thing as J.K. Dobbins. Last year was a contract year for J.K. Dobbins. This is a contract year for Justin Fields. He knows it. One other interesting piece of news, or just nice piece of news. So you tweeted this. Cameron Babb's mom tweeted out a picture of Cameron Babb at practice. And Cameron Babb has had some of the worst injury luck of any player I can remember in Ohio State history. He was back out on the practice field. We obviously weren't there. We didn't get to see it, but she had a great picture of him making a leaping catch. And, it was just, if he can get out on the field and contribute in any way to this team this year, that would be a huge win for him. I mean, I don't think you need to expect 1,000-yard season from him, but if he's just able to get through the season healthy and be a contributor in some form, that would be just a very, very cool story. Two more interesting notes from the Big Ten on Thursday, both of which probably make Ohio State's run to a possible fourth straight Big Ten conference title a little bit easier. The first is that Purdue standout Rondale Moore is opting out of the season. There were a lot of Ohio State fans who seemed pretty happy about that, and it does definitely make that Week 3 game in West Lafayette a little less dicey, probably. But that is now, Tony, 3 of the top players in the conference who have opted out, in addition to the Minnesota wide receiver, in addition to Micah Parsons. And, that is, as we've said earlier in the week, like, it's totally understandable. You can't judge them for the decision. You just have to, you have to respect the decision. It's also it's a little disappointing because those are guys, all 3 of them were guys that, you were looking forward to seeing. They were guys who were kind of on the first team all conference kind of list, and you're not going to get to see any of them play now this fall.
If you think back to that 2018 season that Rondale Moore had, like from game 1, where he just blew up and was just outstanding from the very first time he touched the ball, and we only got to see 1 season of him. That's a disappointment, because that's where guys like him, you see those guys in college football, and then sometimes they're too small or they don't pan out in the NFL, but they are awesome in college football. And he was, as a true freshman, and then was injured last year and now opts out. But he's also a guy we mentioned earlier in the week as a guy who wouldn't surprise you if he did opt out, because Purdue's not necessarily chasing a national championship. And so there are some circumstances there as well. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be, I assume, a daily thing where somebody new is opting out. And I chuckled thinking about it, where, we were talking, or people talked about, you can't go to a spring season because then the star players won't play. And it's like, well, some of the star players aren't playing in a fall season either. But it will be interesting. I saw somebody saying there's a bunch more big names coming. Just wait, you won't believe it. And like, well, no, I think we would pretty much believe just about anybody, even Justin Fields and Sean Wade, who said this week that they have no intentions of opting out. But there are times where players have no intention of leaving early for the NFL until they have like a week to think about it in solitary confinement, and they realize, I wouldn't mind being a millionaire instead of a college kid. So that's a decision that it seems hard and probably takes a lot of thought. But who here could fault them for chasing that, which is their ultimate dream? That's why they came here. It's just disappointing that they could play this year and choose not to, but you understand it.
Yeah, anyone who has had the conversation about sending their kids back to school, or, do I go back to work in the office, or do I keep working from home? Or, there's a whole bunch of decisions that we all get to make on a day-to-day basis that you didn't have to think twice about 6 months ago, and here we are. So, yeah, I think this is in the recruiting tweet parlance. Please respect my decision. No interviews, please. Like, that's just it is what it is, and everyone gets to make their own choice, and you got to just kind of respect it. The other news of note on Thursday is that as of right now, Penn State will not have fans in the stands for any of its home games. The current restrictions in Pennsylvania limit outdoor events to 250 people total. That includes players, coaches, staffers, TV crews, media. So That could obviously change before the Buckeyes travel there in November. But if it stays the way it is right now and there are no fans, and since in November it's a day game, it's probably the big noon kickoff on Fox instead of primetime on ABC. I mean, that is certainly what it seems like it will be right now. Tony, that is going to be a very different Beaver Stadium atmosphere than we're used to seeing when the Buckeyes play there.
Yeah, very much so. And we kind of assumed there would be no whiteout this year just because of the numbers being what they are. But you think maybe they would be shooting for 20,000 or something like that so they could do something. But yeah, when that came down on Thursday, it's at this point, you see all of these other sports with no fans in the stadium, watching hockey, watching the NBA, where it's virtual fans or no fans. And so it doesn't come as a huge surprise. That's not many for a stadium that size when you can have that. You can have more than that in a Kroger or a Walmart or a Meijer, and yet they're not permitted in an outdoor stadium. I don't quite get that logic. When we're talking about shopping centers where it's square people per square feet, whether it's and it's been a while since I looked at the numbers that were handed down, but it wasn't one per 1,000 square feet or whatever, and I don't understand the limit to that degree unless you just don't want anybody there.
Well, and I think the other thing is a lot of this is going to change, and a lot of this is going to vary by state. I mean, Ohio State is still looking at potentially 20,000 people. Iowa on Thursday said 10 to 15,000 people. And, Texas, as of a month ago, was saying absolutely 50,000 fans. And now it's like maybe 20,000 fans. And there's still 4 weeks to go before, the Big Ten starts its season. Some of the other conferences may start even a little later. There's plenty of time for those numbers to go up, to go down, to go to 0, to go to 30,000. I mean, if you've learned anything this year, things do not always stay exactly the same. That has been a very consistent lesson this year. I'm sure you have learned it by now. Tony, thank you for joining us. We mentioned earlier the episode of Buckeye Weekly that we dropped last night. As Tony said, that is our third episode in 3 days. The schedule came out. Practice has started. There has been a ton to talk about this week. And those shows and much of our coverage at Buckeye Scoop, all free outside the paywall. So check out BuckeyeScoop.com. If you like what you see, please consider becoming a member. There is now less than a month to go before kickoff. So if you sign up today and give us a month, see if you like it, you're going to have pregame and postgame coverage of an Ohio State football game in that first month. This seems like a pretty good time to do it. We have a number of press availabilities coming up. We're supposed to be getting more players and coaches next week. So there should be a steady flood of interviews and stories at BuckeyeScoop.com. So, like I said, give it a month, see if you like it. It is the price of a lousy chain store pizza. You'll get full access to our incredible staff, some great additional perks, and there's going to be a ton to talk about. So, give us a look at BuckeyeScoop.com today. Thank you guys for listening. Have a great weekend. We will talk to you on Monday.